This course is primarily about creating materials using the Unreal Material Editor. However, you can import materials that you've already built inside of 3ds Max or SketchUp. Importing materials is quite easy using Datasmith. Let's look at the workflow for bringing materials in from 3ds Max, in this case V-Ray materials, using Datasmith. In order to make use of Datasmith to import the materials, you'll need to go to the Epic Games Launcher, and on the Library panel, make sure that in your version of Unreal, you have the installed Unreal Datasmith plugin. If you don't have it installed, you can get it under Unreal Studio Beta at the bottom here, where it says Unreal Datasmith Install to Engine. You'll also want to have the Datasmith plugin for 3ds Max. You can get that using this link here, where it says Exporter Plugins. Click on this to go to the web page where you can download the 3ds Max plugin. The Datasmith import process supports a lot of different material types, as you can see here. Obviously, it supports standard 3ds Max materials such as anisotropic, blend, Phong, and so forth, as well as 3ds Max physical materials, and of course V-Ray materials, which we're using in this course, Corona materials, Arnold, Mental Ray, and quite a few more. Here we can see how V-Ray specific materials are translated into Unreal using Datasmith. So the diffuse map becomes obviously the base color in Unreal. The reflect map is our specular value. Then in V-Ray, H glossiness and R glossiness become the roughness value. These two are combined together to give you the roughness value. We also have opacity being controlled from V-Ray's refract map. And then the bump map in V-Ray is turned into a normal map. V-Ray's index of refraction value is piped into the refraction input on Unreal. And of course, any material that has an index of refraction will automatically be turned into a transparent blend mode material in Unreal. If you're using opacity in V-Ray for masking, that will be input into Unreal's opacity mask, and the material's blend mode will be automatically turned into an opacity mask. If you're using displacement mapping in V-Ray, that will be input into the world displacement input in the Unreal PBR material. And finally, self-illumination, that will go into emissive color. Exporting the scene and materials from 3ds Max is quite easy. The Datasmith plugin simply creates a new file format to export to. With a 3ds Max scene loaded, we'll go to File, Export, and then choose Export again. From the Save As type, we'll use the drop-down and find Unreal Datasmith here. It's a uDatasmith file towards the bottom. Select that, and then we can export it with whatever name we choose. In this case, we'll call this ArchViz Interior. When the Datasmith Export Options window comes up, we can see here that the only option we really have is whether or not we want to export the entire scene, or visible objects, or just what we currently have selected. Bear in mind that when choosing visible objects, if there is an object that is not currently visible in the scene, it will not be exported. So make sure that any objects you want exported are visible. Then just hit OK. Then we'll see the export progress down at the bottom of 3ds Max. When the export process completes, you'll get an output warnings window, which will give you any kind of error messages or informational messages in the export process. In this case, we have no error messages, but we do have an informational message here letting us know that any black and white bump maps in our materials will automatically be converted to RGB-based normal maps for Unreal Engine. In this course, we've already imported the course asset, so you won't need to do that. However, if we were importing this scene from scratch, we'd simply go to the top here where it says Import Datasmith and click this. From there, we will browse to the file that we've just exported from 3ds Max and choose it. The first window that comes up is asking where you'd like to import the asset. I'm going to create a new folder here by right-clicking on Content and choosing New Folder. We'll call this Datasmith Import 2. Then we'll hit OK. The second window is the Datasmith Import Options window, and by default, under Process, you should have everything checked: geometry, materials and textures, lights, and cameras. This will make sure that everything in the scene from 3ds Max is imported into Unreal. And of course, for this course, we're focusing on materials and textures. From here, all we have to do is hit Import. And now we'll wait for Unreal to finish importing the assets. Once the scene has been imported, you'll find all the familiar folders here. We've got geometries, lights, materials, and textures. And if we go into the materials folder, all of our materials from 3ds Max have been rebuilt. And you can see them here in the scene. Now, this scene is not lit or anything currently, so it's not going to look as good as the version that we're shipping with the course. However, you can still see the materials here, but there are some things that would need to be tweaked. For instance, metallic materials do not come in as metallic from 3ds Max, and that is because there's no way to specify that a material should be metallic in V-Ray. So you'll have to open up this doorknob material, for instance, which is supposed to be metallic. And in here, of course, you'll need to apply the metallic value here. So we can do that really quick by holding down the 1 key. And in our constant, we'll set that to 1. And then drag that into the metallic input. And there we go. So we can save that, jump back to our scene, and our doorknobs are now metallic. Being able to bring in our materials that we've already built for 3ds Max or SketchUp using Datasmith is a great option and probably the way we're going to work most of the time. And the good news is that the translation from 3ds Max and SketchUp into Unreal is pretty close to 1-to-1. It's not exactly the same. There are some issues like I showed you with metallic and things like that, but for the most part, your materials are going to look the same. All right, so now that we've covered the import process for our materials, that brings us to the conclusion of our course. So up next, we'll wrap up and I'll offer you my final thoughts.